morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. It's June the 19th, and it's This Is Going Well, I think, with David Cooper. I am David Cooper. As ever, this is the show where no one's listening, no one cares, where every episode's the last episode, and yet most every day a new one. Today, a fantabulous lineup. Gary Direnfeld, therapist, is going to be here for Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. Gary and I are going to discuss bad uncomfortable versus good uncomfortable. More on that in a minute, but I think good uncomfortable can really push you and help you develop yourself as a person. And bad uncomfortable, you should avoid it and avoid people who put you in that situation. Gary will be on in about 10 minutes. Then, time blindness. There's been a viral video where a woman complained she couldn't get a job because she said she has trouble being on time. She's looking for accommodation. The internet is looking to crucify her, and we'll talk to an occupational therapist to really pick the nuance of this one apart. After that, film critic Richard Crouse on the videos that scared the crap out of millennials like me. Then it's foreign correspondent Tony 5. Tony's in Bulgaria in a Bulgarian airport, and we are going to get the Bulgarian airport update from Tony. Finally, should you be telling bots, ChatGPT, any chatbot at all, information that you don't want to be shared? Are there privacy concerns? We'll talk to a lawyer and a tech expert about that, and maybe don't tell ChatGPT anything you don't want shared in the meantime. That is our show. It sounds like a good one. But first, this. Here's a little nugget of news that'll make you think twice about your next drive-thru order at McDonald's, or McDo as the French say. McDonald's has been testing out this fancy new AI-powered ordering system, to streamline the process and possibly cut down on human error. Cut down in human error, they said in earnest. Well, the problem is the McDonald's AI system seemed to have a mind of its own and a craving for chaos. So you roll up to the drive-thru, right? And you want to order a delicious McDonald's salted caramel ice cream. Just like one woman did, but the McDonald's AI added multiple stacks of butter to her order? What? I didn't even know you could order extra butter from McDonald's. Another reported order turned 1 cup of tea into 9 cups of tea. I mean, for one person who drinks that much tea. The Queen! But get this, it's the McDonald's AI pièce de résistance. Sticking with the ice cream theme, some lucky soul got bacon added to their ice cream. Now, I'm all for adventurous eating, but that is just one step away from turning your sundae into a BLTS? Bacon, lettuce, tomato sundae? I gotta go back to the writer's room. Another reported mistake, folks who ended up with hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of chicken nuggets. That actually sounds delicious to me. Maybe the AI was trying to tell them they needed more protein. In any event, McDonald's decided that their artificial intelligence ordering system needed just a little more time in the fryer before it was ready to serve, so they're pulling the plug on this experiment for now, but they assure us that voice recognition technology will be a part of their future. It sucks now, will they fix it later? That I don't know, but I guess replacing human workers wasn't as easy as the bigwigs at corporate thought, believe it or not, because humans still know the difference between a side of fries and 10,000 sides of fries. IBM, or International Business Machines. I don't know why I expanded that acronym. You've heard of the company regardless. They are the brains behind this op, and they insist that the tech is top-notch. They say they're ready to keep working on it because, hey, who wouldn't want to be a part of a world where your Big Mac comes with a side of hilarity? So next time you're at McDonald's, enjoy the human touch while it lasts. At least then you won't end up with a bacon sundae, unless that's your thing. No judgment, no judgment. Hashtag BLTS, said no one. On Twitter, or as I refuse to call it, X. The following headline, an Ohio attorney finds himself in a bit of a pickle. I mean a Pringle, a poopy Pringle. This will all make sense in a second. An Ohio attorney has just had his license reinstated after, wait for it, pooping in a Pringles can and tossing it into a parking lot. See, I explained it. And you heard that right. This guy turned a snack container into a literal crap chute. So here's what happened. The Ohio Supreme Court gave the man a 6-month timeout for this little mishap. But just recently, the court decided that after serving that 6-month suspension from practicing law, that he'd kept his nose clean and literally his cans, and that he could go back to practicing. Just yesterday, they gave him a green light. Digging a little deeper, back in November of 2021, security cameras caught our lawyer, a criminal defense attorney no less, dropping a Pringles can filled with human feces into the parking lot of a crime victim advocacy center. This, my friends, is a twisted game of pass the parcel. Now, when the court found out, they were not thrilled with the man's choice of extracurricular activities. They had some serious doubts about his ability to practice law with, shall we say, a straight face. Now, the lawyer insists he wasn't targeting anyone specific. In fact, he admitted to pulling this, quote, Pringles prank at least 10 times that year, a repeat offender. But you have to wonder, a criminal defense attorney pranking, in a disgusting way, a crime victim advocacy center? This doesn't add up. And the folks at this center had known the lawyer for years. He was even scheduled to see them in court just 15 minutes after his little poopy deposit. That is some serious dedication to practical jokes, or even a very misguided sense of humor. But to the man's credit, he does have a record that's been spotless since 1976. Of course, at least until this stinky saga. So now he's back to the courtroom, hopefully with all his Pringles cans firmly on the shelf and all his poop firmly in the toilet. Or not so firmly. No judgment. I guess you can say he's been given a chance to, I don't know, not keep it in the can. If nothing else, this is a stark reminder that the old idiom is true. The poopy chips really do fall where they may. In English, businessmen suing tech companies because they got caught sleeping with a sex worker and it led to divorce news. An English businessman is suing Apple because his wife found some not so innocent messages that he sent to sex workers on their family iMac. Yes, that's right. He thought he deleted those messages from his iPhone, but thanks to Apple's nifty device synchronization, they were still lounging around on the iMac that the whole family could use like unwanted house guests. Now, our anonymous hero, let's call him John Doe, claims Apple should have told them that deleting a message on one device doesn't erase it from all linked devices. Imagine his surprise when his wife discovered these messages, leading to a divorce that's costing him over £5 million. £5 million! That is a lot of fish and chips. Now, Mr. Doe is taking Apple to court, and he's aiming for that £5 million payout to be covered by Apple. He even wants to turn this into a class action suit for others who may have been caught with their digital pants way down. His lawyer says iPhones misleadingly inform users that messages are deleted, while in reality, they're just hiding in plain sight, lingering on their other devices. Look, I'm not saying Mr. John Doe should have been more careful with his, shall we say, extracurricular activities, but suing Apple because you got caught cheating is a bit like suing a tobacco company because it gave you lung cancer. Oh wait, has that happened? Hey, I didn't know these cigarettes with a warning on the box that said they could cause lung cancer gave me lung cancer. I don't know, maybe sometimes you just got to make your own mistakes. But bottom line here, my opinion, if you're sending naughty messages to sex workers, maybe check all your devices. Or better yet, don't do it at all if it would be cheating and your wife would leave you over it. Keep it to single behavior. Yeah, keep it to single person behavior. Because blaming technology for your bad behavior is like blaming your toothbrush for cavities. And as for Mr. John Doe, maybe his next gadget should be a rotary phone. Those were fun. Rotary phones are actually lots of fun. I own several. I collect old telephones. Is that relevant to this story? Not at all! It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday, and therapist Gary Direnfeld is going to tell us about bad uncomfortable versus good uncomfortable. I'm excited about this one because I got a lot of thoughts that good discomfort can actually lead to a lot of personal growth, but bad discomfort, well, that shit's bad. Gary up next. We are here with Gary Direnfeld. Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. Gary is a little bit handsome. Gary, you're looking good today. Did you get a haircut? What's going on?
Oh, I know you love me.
I do.
Like I
you
love
got like
you
a
too.
like a cool Steven Spielberg vibe going on.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Some people tell me I look like Leonard Maltin. Do you know who he is?
Leonard Maltin. No, what is that like? Is this like a reference from the late 1800s? Who's Leonard Maltin?
No. He's a movie reviewer. And so if you Google Leonard Maltin.
Oh, you're much better looking than that guy.
I think he's my doppelganger.
No, come on. That guy, he wouldn't even bother with you. I'd let take me out to dinner.
So you think Steven Spielberg?
Yeah, why not?
He has a much more slimmer face.
Well, okay. Let's.
So I'm somewhere in between.
We're here talking the ins and outs of slim faces with Gary Direnfeld, which is what we do every week. I want to talk to you today about bad uncomfortable, good uncomfortable, because you wrote about it, and I started thinking about it, and your writings aren't exactly what I was thinking, so I thought we could talk about both, but you were getting into something before we started. So good uncomfortable, bad uncomfortable comes a little bit later. What were you trying to tell me when I said, should I be rolling right now? And then I started rolling.
Well, I had literally just finished up a meeting with someone, and you were wondering about that. You wondered about their name, where they live.
I was joking. I know you can't give me your clients' addresses and social security numbers. I know.
And I said, yeah, it's exactly what I said. You're not going to get that. But I said there were some elements of what we discussed that I could talk about. And it's a theme that I've seen played out in a number of the people that I meet with. And it's people who neither parent is the greatest of parents. They're both working.
Yeah.
And they're just not available to the children as the children are growing up. And the eldest is responsible for the youngers, taking care of them. They're what we call the parentified child. So I have this felt responsibility to take care of the kids, and no one else is there. And these are kids who grow up with, well, on the one hand, this tremendous sense of responsibility that is overwhelming and often actually doomed to anxiety and depression because they have a responsibility without authority, and they can't do all the things that a parent should be able to do. So it's kind of doomed to failure. But the flip side to that is, without their parents actively involved, these kids get to do whatever the hell they want to do as well.
Yeah, we can't expect kids to be good parents. If they do a bad job, the younger ones bear the brunt of it, and it's not really the oldest one's fault.
Right. But the oldest one kind of lives without supervision, which means they'll eat when they want, they'll do what they want, they'll come home when they want, they'll see what they want. And that sense of I'm not accountable and I get to do what I want, that is like the very definition of kind of like no responsibility and indulged. And it feels good as a youngster, it feels great as a teenager. But when you apply that in an intimate relationship, it really breaks down, because rarely does one's partner think, yeah, you get to do whatever you want when you want to do it, and you have no responsibilities here. So it's a theme that I just see played out in a number of the persons that I meet with. And they're angry because their partners are trying to hold them accountable, and they feel like they're cramping their style. But the flip side is the anger and the upset of the partner is reasonable.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to come to terms with. What? I have to change? I don't get to do what I want when I want? In many instances, people look at that person and say they're a narcissist. And that's not a narcissist. They're not out to intentionally hurt you. They're not out to gaslight you. They're not out to pretend otherwise. They're just used to doing what they want when they want to, and they're not used to coming up against a boundary. And so just to differentiate that, hey, it doesn't make them easy to live with, and it leads to many a separation. But I just want to differentiate that's not a narcissist.
Maladaptive, I think that's what we call it. They learn these things growing up by parents that weren't around, and then they express them as adults, not to torture others, but because they haven't learned any better. It
is certainly maladaptive, but not narcissistic. These days, everyone's, this person's a narcissist, that person's a narcissist. They're not all narcissists, even though they may be indulged and self-absorbed.
That word does get thrown around a lot, and it's to the detriment of those that have to deal with narcissists.
A real And I see those persons as well, by the way.
I'm sure.
It's not that I don't see them. It's just that, this file has caused me to think about that we really do need to be clear who is, who isn't, and what's going on underneath. Because the person that I met with is actually anxious to change.
Yeah.
Isn't satisfied with the outcome, is prepared to be self-reflective. That's not a narcissist.
No.
It was maladaptive. They're going to have to wrap their heads around this, but that wasn't a narcissist. And that's a good thing, but there's still stuff to work on.
So the person who wants to do whatever they want, when they want, their spouse, I was thinking, is like the rock and roll wife, the husband, or maybe the rock and roll husband. The spouse is a rock and roller. They go on tour. What happens on tour stays on tour. I have a friend of a friend who was
a friend of a friend. Okay.
A famous musician. I'm not going to say who. His Toronto girlfriend. And he once invited her. They both happened to be in Las Vegas. There was a concert in Las Vegas. And his wife was backstage. And he invited her anyway. And this woman was freaked out. She thought she was going to get yelled at. She didn't want to go, but she went. And the wife just goes up to her and she's like, I know. There are those among us who sign up to be rock and roll wives or rock and roll husbands, but they're few and far between. And it's got to be a clear arrangement beforehand that you can say or do what you want. It's pretty rare.
That's even what I said to this person. It rarely works, but where it does work, you have to be authentic and transparent, and it has to be acceptable on both sides.
It can't be the bait and switch. You think the person's going to be the good husband, the good spouse who
It
can accept reasonable boundaries,
Yeah.
And then at the last minute, you don't respect those reasonable boundaries. That doesn't work.
For sure not.
I feel like I'd be a good rock and roll husband. I really do. For that reason, I've always thought I could date a porn star. I've never done it. I don't intend to do it. I don't have a thing for porn stars, but I think I could handle it. But thinking you can handle it and actually handling it are two different things.
Two different things. And both persons, have to buy into and maintain the rules.
Yeah.
Whatever those rules are. Hey, that's why, those persons who are into polygamy, those persons who live in threesomes, it works.
I think polyamory is the term that's vogue. Now, polygamy is more like, religious.
Did I say polygamy?
You did, yeah.
Did I say that? Oh, I apologize.
Polyamory implies like consenting adults living in an alternate lifestyle. Polygamy implies
that was
like
my Freudian slip.
Polygamy is like Mormon compound with child brides.
Right. If you're polyamorous, yes. It can work for those who they're clear about what the boundaries and the rules are and they abide by it. Mm-hmm. And that's fine.
And they signed up from the beginning.
That's it.
It's not for everyone.
But it's in with full disclosure.
Yeah. Rock and roll wives. Do you think you could be a rock and roll husband, Gary, with your wife just touring the country, doing whatever she wants, whoever she wants, whenever she wants?
It wouldn't work for me. My wife and I are on the same page. We are one partner people.
I have a friend who just split up with their girlfriend because she said it was just too much having a full-time girlfriend around my apartment. So now she's looking to be like a third. Like she's looking for a married couple, perhaps a lesbian couple, where she just sees one of them once a week. It's all cuddles and intimacy once a week, but those other 6 days, she's looking for her own thing. And I love it. I'm like, you know what you're looking for? I don't know if you're going to find it, but you know what you're looking for.
David, I think that she will find it.
Maybe.
It may not be long-term and fully stable, but thanks to the internet.
Before these people couldn't breed. Now with the internet, they can find each other and have offspring. We're getting weirder every generation.
But that's it. You can find persons who match your criteria more easily these days. To me, that's not a bad thing.
No.
Because at all, actually. Because again, people are transparent, they're honest, they're authentic about it, going in with both eyes open, and we're adults. You're allowed to do that. With the internet, the odds are good, but the goods are odd, Gary.
All right, we're here with Gary Direnfeld. We're going to get to my.
That.
You like that one? I wish I could take credit for it. I didn't write that one.
Okay, I loved it.
When we come back, we're going to talk good uncomfortable, bad uncomfortable. Gary has some thoughts that are very specific, but I have thoughts that are more, widely applicable. We're going to discuss that in a moment. Gary Direnfeld is here. It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. Gary, we are back. Gary Direnfeld, therapist, social worker. You can find him at yoursocialworker.com/Gary. No, I don't know why I said that. Just yoursocialworker.com. Gary, welcome back.
Yoursocialworker.com. Good to be with you again, David.
So, good uncomfortable, bad uncomfortable. How do you define that? I know you just wrote about it. It's more in the context of relationships,
Yeah. So, if someone is imposing on you inappropriately, gaslighting you, wanting you to do things that aren't good for you, that's bad uncomfortable. You're being abused. You're being taken advantage of. You're being manipulated. That's bad uncomfortable. Good uncomfortable is for those folks who have trouble setting boundaries, yet go there. And start to set those boundaries, start to give the feedback, start asserting themselves. I see that in a lot of people pleasers. They're so uncomfortable saying no. But that's a good uncomfortable. Those are good things to practice. And if the other person who is manipulating, abusing, taking advantage of you has difficulty with that, that's also a good uncomfortable. That's, them having to deal with the impact of their own behavior, and you're holding them accountable. So good uncomfortable, bad uncomfortable.
I'm thinking of the adult who maybe had the overbearing parent growing up, didn't respect the boundaries, kept busting in the room and didn't give you privacy and just was controlling, and you had to please them and placate them. And then as an adult, you stand up for yourself. You say this kind of behavior is unacceptable.
That as well.
But you're making your parent uncomfortable.
That's a good uncomfortable. Let them be uncomfortable having to assess and take responsibility for their own behavior. That's a good uncomfortable, as is your uncomfortable. Is it a word? Uncomfortableness. Imposing that upon them. So you setting the boundaries. These are good uncomfortables.
When people set boundaries with me, I'm a Jew. I'm bad with boundaries. There's a Sarah Silverman joke where she's like, I took my mother to a soccer game so I could show her what boundaries look like. Because the field has boundaries on it. Bad joke. I mean, maybe good joke. I don't know. But how do I tell the difference when someone sets a boundary with me and I feel uncomfortable by it? How do I tell the difference between, is this an unreasonable thing to impose? You
may not be able to necessarily tell the difference in the moment, but the person, assuming they're setting that boundary and it's appropriate for them to do so, you may not like it. You may experience it actually as a bad uncomfortable because it's cramping your style. You're not going to be able to take advantage of them, manipulate, or exploit. So you may feel that as a bad comfortable. If in the first session, we distinguished the narcissist. If you're the narcissist meeting with those boundaries, man, it's going to be experienced as horrible, bad, yet to the person doing that, uncomfortable for them, that's a good uncomfortable. So look, there will be situations where a good uncomfortable may create what feels like a bad uncomfortable. It doesn't make it wrong.
I was reading online. I read this Reddit, the social media website Reddit. There's one called Am I Wrong? And there was this dude who had a roommate, moved in with a roommate. They were interviewed by the roommate, no issues, nothing brought up. The roommate says, I'm kosher. The person coming in says, okay, I can deal with that. That's all right. You go ahead and be kosher. Once they move in, the person who's not kosher keeps things in the fridge, not pork, just not kosher meats that could be kosher, like beef or lamb or chicken. It's just not. And then the kosher person says, you can't keep that in the house. And the person posting, not being Jewish, wasn't sure whether they were crazy or whether that was an unreasonable demand. I, as a Jew, can kind of remove that. I'm not going to be accused of being an anti-Semite, although maybe I will be, because if there's anyone who hates Jews, it's me. They're so annoying. No, I'm kidding. But I think that's like
only a Jew can say that. It's like we're all allowed to diss on our own race, religion, culture, but no one else can. Just to be clear, then it's racism.
Yeah, Chris Rock's my favorite comedian. If I go, in the streets and start quoting his routines, I'm not going to have a good time.
You're going to be dead.
Listen.
Anyways, okay, so let's
what about accommodating others with religious beliefs? Relationship beliefs, like, okay, maybe the parents don't want to
wait a minute. You're not talking about accommodation. In your example, there was an agreement, and the agreement was broken. The agreement was, if you're going to live here, you got to keep it kosher here. The person said yes. That's a totally different situation. I'd be saying goodbye to that person if I were the landlord or the...
Fair enough. Forget about the kosher thing. This one's perhaps more applicable, more understandable, more clear-cut, at least for me, because I don't hate gay people. Your parents don't want you to bring home a partner because they're of the same sex for Thanksgiving. They say it makes them uncomfortable because they are bigots. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Right. Look, it's going to be up to you the degree to which you want to push your own parents' limits. My perspective, what you're doing is a good uncomfortable. Their perspective, it's a bad uncomfortable. Sometimes, what is comfortable is in the eyes of the beholder, but it doesn't make them right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Doesn't make your parents right. You're right.
I guess it's up to the individual whether they want to try to push their parents to a more tolerable kind of viewpoint,
Well, so much... In those scenarios, this is the therapist now speaking, in those scenarios, when parents aren't open, when they are racist, bigoted, homophobic, you have to determine how much you feel you need their loving and or support, the degree to which you're going to compromise your own values, and what all that is worth to you, in a sense. I hate seeing people in those. I hate seeing those who are more reasonable and appropriate in what their wants and their asks. I hate seeing that squashed. That is, in those situations, what leads often to mental health issues and family breakups, when we do have parents rigidly adhering to religious stereotypes, if you will, or religious rigid belief systems with respect to sexuality. So I like pushing those boundaries. Absolutely. I think that is a good uncomfortable and a reasonable uncomfortable to impose. However, people are going to have to do what works for them in the moment.
And you have to be mindful of your partner. Like, suppose I got a boyfriend, Timmy.
Hello.
Like my boyfriend, Timmy, maybe doesn't want to be subjected to my parents who are being discriminatory. Like, I want to push them in the right direction. I want to make them uncomfortable, but I gotta consider my boyfriend over here.
Yes. And I think it's a horrible position for a person to be in, where they have to compromise who they really are, their immutable traits. Being gay, being trans, this, people keep talking about fucking choices. These are not choices any more than my brown eyes are a choice, or my gray hair. Yeah, okay, I can change the color.
You could dye it Just for Men, Gary, and I am trying to get a Just for Men sponsorship here. So.
I'm a white cisgender male. I didn't choose it. It is who I am, and I just hate. If I can say that, I hate. Yeah, there's some things I hate.
You hate. I mean, that's...
I hate. And no one should have to make that disgusting choice.
To be clear, my parents aren't raging homophobes, and I don't have a boyfriend named Timmy. This was a hypothetical. But if they were, and I did, I feel bad for Timmy. I might keep him away.
So uncomfortable feelings. There's good uncomfortable. There's bad uncomfortable. When you have to eat shit, and it's inappropriate, that's a bad uncomfortable. Making someone else uncomfortable to hopefully take them in a better place, and you being uncomfortable, pushing through that that's a good uncomfortable.
Okay, here's where I want to take this. It's the same topic, but it's applied towards personal development and personal growth. It has nothing to do with your relationship with others. Good uncomfortable, bad uncomfortable. I used to have a fear of public speaking. Through going through discomfort is how I got over it. I guess sometimes shrinks will call it exposure therapy.
Yes.
Let's talk about that when we come back. It's the same, I don't know, headline, but it's a completely different body to the article.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
We're here with Gary, and I hope I make him bad uncomfortable all the time. When it comes to personal development, that made no sense. Gary Direnfeld's here, Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. We are back. What a great break. So much happened. We're here with Gary Direnfeld. I pressed pause, and then I pressed unpause. Nothing happened. Gary, welcome back.
Good to be with you still.
Good uncomfortable, bad uncomfortable. I used to be scared in class to raise my hand and answer a question I knew the answer to. That's how scared I was of groups.
Yeah.
Then, I always wanted to try stand-up comedy, and I just couldn't bear myself to do it. Until I got divorced, until my life was so shitty that I thought bombing in comedy can't make my life any worse.
Any worse.
I had hit rock bottom to try the thing that I was most scared of because I thought, how bad could it be? Unfortunately, it was bad. Bombing was bad and it is bad, and there's the only thing that you can do to get good at bombing is just have a lot of experience bombing. It's not, but that's besides the point. I knew there were things I had to do to push myself to overcome my demons. Like I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. Once I tried stand-up comedy, things like speaking at work, speaking at conferences, the proverbial raising your hand in a room full of your peers just became so easy for me because I was pushed so far in the direction of discomfort. The things that would cause discomfort in the past were so minor, it seemed.
Yeah, they paled in comparison now.
That's exposure therapy. That to me is good discomfort. My girlfriend was subject to, in the apartment, a couple break-ins when we lived in San Francisco, one of which she had to confront an intruder with a chair over her head, screaming at him. She's okay. The intruder was just like a junkie high. He fell over and started screaming. He was in a stupor. The cops came. Not important. When she hears a noise in the house now, I could take the attitude, you need to expose yourself to these noises. You got to investigate yourself. I don't agree. That is bad discomfort when it comes to personal development. I try to keep her safe. I try to keep the apartment safe. If it's 3 a.m. in the morning and she hears a noise, even though I'm convinced it's not an intruder, to keep her comfortable, I'll go take a look. Like her getting through PTSD is not a situation where exposure therapy is necessarily the right move. These are ways in which good uncomfortable, bad uncomfortable exist for me. These are just two examples in terms of personal development. This is a totally different conversation than we just had. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on these two things.
So, with respect to the first thing that you brought up, public speaking, you had anxiety. And one of the ways we treat anxiety is through exposure therapy. You have to confront and have experience in the very thing that triggers you. And that is good uncomfortable. It doesn't feel so good.
No.
But it's to a good end. And that is a significantly helpful strategy for many overcoming anxiety. And many parents, many persons, they try to avoid the situation or the trigger that creates the anxiety, and that just prolongs it. They try to accommodate it. That just prolongs it. So there is good uncomfortable. And that good uncomfortable is in a controlled way, not an overwhelming way, increasing exposure to the thing that triggers you such that you can come to be at ease with it. PTSD, having been intruded upon, that really is terrifying. And in some ways, we do want, and that's bad uncomfortable. It interferes with your life. It gets in the way. It creates conditions where you don't feel safe, where you should or could feel safe. There are different treatments for that where hopefully you're not made to feel uncomfortable, but where you can actually process that. EMDR, if I can get EMDR. I always get the acronym off base. If you Google it, you'll find something close enough. But it's eye desensitization movement, something or other. Okay.
Well, helpful, Gary. Real helpful there. Real expert over here.
Yeah, I know. Somebody's going to shoot me for not getting that right. But that is one approach to therapy where you do discuss the triggering event as you're looking at this light bar with the lights going back and forth. And it sounds really wonky. It sounds crazy. Yet for many a person, it helps lessen the intensity of that traumatic experience. So, good uncomfortable, bad uncomfortable. There is treatment, and if you're going for that good uncomfortable, it's the support that you receive in therapy that makes it feel safer and allows you to address it.
PTSD aside, because I think that's a separate thing. I think seeking professional help, and maybe your therapist wants you to go through exposure therapy, but it's not up to your friends if you're an arachnophobe to put spiders on you. Do you know what I'm saying? Like maybe your therapist and you will go to the zoo and you'll meet a tarantula. I don't know, but I'm just saying it's not on the friends to push you there. But that stuff aside, there is a school of thought, and I may well be of it, where the things that you're scared to try, like for me, it was public speaking, stand-up comedy. Those are the things that you should seek out for personal growth. Not for everything, but there's a lot of things like that. And I myself have found great growth in just pursuing the thing that I was most scared of.
I agree. And apropos your experience, my first bit of public speaking, it was in a 2-person play in grade 10. This was theater arts, and it's in front of the school. I lost my lines. I went mute, and the theater arts teacher is behind the curtain, and he's throwing lines at me, and I am reciting them as if I've just read them off of a page. It was the worst public experience, David, of my life. But now I can stand up in front of literally thousands of people, all because of increasing exposure and practice over time. And, if we're going to be therapy Thursday on whatever today is, we want people to come away from this part of the conversation appreciating that being uncomfortable to overcome a discomfort can be therapeutic when done in a controlled way, where you feel you have some safe, where you can tap out if necessary. And it's so liberating to overcome those fears, and just to let people know that.
I've had a lot of bad stand-up bombs where audience groans, where the people who book me in the show don't like me after my set because I took down the whole room with me, which is to say the next act's all bombed because the audience was so off-put by you.
Don't follow Cooper, you're doomed.
I've gone through some horrible open mics where people don't give a shit. I have gone through awful comedy experiences, but I'm so numb to it because I went through so many. The thing that stands out for me is not a bomb where things were so bad I took down the whole room, although those do exist. But it was a grade 11 soliloquy. My class, every 20 of us in our drama class, or however many were in there, had to do a soliloquy from a famous play, and then we invited the whole grade, not just our class, but the 5 or 6 other classes, to watch our soliloquies. I get out there to do one, I think from Macbeth. I don't even remember what, but I get out there and I go blank, and I just say, I'm sorry, mid-soliloquy, and then I walk off stage, slunked out, and everyone just kind of looks in horror, and the curtains close, and the next person comes out. I remember that, because that was so painful. I didn't have the exposure to stand-up, to bombing every night, to screwing up that bad, and getting up there the next night.
That had to be painful. It must have felt so embarrassing. And then you have to deal with all the kids and how they're going to respond to you afterwards.
I mean, no one cared. What do they care? They just wanted to go to recess.
You're right. They don't. But it's a high school nightmare.
It is. Well, I'm glad we got to do uncomfortable in a few different ways and of looking at it. Thank you, Gary. This is always fun.
Chatting with you is comfortable, and I like that we can go from one topic to the next. And as we're talking, David, I'm thinking of the listener, and I'm wondering, what is their takeaway? And hopefully they get something that could be of value from our conversations.
Well, ladies, he's a handsome Steven Spielberg looking alike, but his wife is not a rock and roll wife, so he's taken.
I'm taken.
Gary, thank you. You can say thank you back if you want.
I thought you were going to cut off right then and there. David, as always, a real pleasure.
Gary, thank you.
Here we go.
Up next, a viral video went around about a woman who couldn't get a job because she says she has time blindness, which is the inability to recognize when time has passed or how to estimate how long something will take. Is time blindness a real thing? I'll play a clip from that video and we'll talk to an occupational therapist who specializes in mental health and ADHD to really pick this one apart and provide more nuance to something that seems, at least to me on the surface, pretty ridiculous. A young woman took to social media this week, upset a potential employer turned her down for a job because of her request for accommodation for what she sees as a disability of sorts. Here is the clip.
So I'm applying to go somewhere, and I just wanted to know, are there accommodations for people who struggle with time blindness and being on time, And then the person I was with interrupted and acted like I was asking something else, and then when we were done, they actually started yelling at me and saying that accommodations for time blindness doesn't exist, and if you struggle with being on time, you'll never be able to get a job. And then they're like, your stupid generation wants to destroy the workplace. And yeah, I think that a culture where workers are just cut off because they struggle with being on time, when there's other solutions that we can look to, I think that just anybody who thinks it's okay to just treat people like that, yeah, that culture needs to be dismantled.
We are here to discuss time blindness, or as my girlfriend calls it, time optimism, here with Daniel Lee, who's an occupational therapist. He practices in mental health, ADHD, and cognitive rehabilitation. Adam, thank you for chatting with me today.
Thank you for letting me join the podcast.
The pleasure is all ours. I think a lot of people, when they watched or heard this video, I don't know, there's sort of like my grandfather was very much like, be a tough guy, just suffer in pain. But then a part of me is like, well, if there is a cognitive disorder that makes you perceive time badly, maybe there's something to this. I'm not sure of what mind I am, and I'd be very interested to get your take. So before we get too much more into it, what is your definition of time blindness?
Yeah. So time blindness, it is a trait of neurodivergent individuals such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, or even acquired disorders like trauma that can really impact the way the brain processes time. So it is a neurobiological basis as to how the brain perceives time and estimates time. So people who have this issue have challenges with perceiving time, like how much time has passed or how much time is left before an upcoming event, or estimating how long something will take. Time sequencing, so counting the order in which the events occurred, and then time reproduction, like repeating a task for the same amount of time that occurred previously.
Now I'm starting to realize that my girlfriend's habitual lateness, when she calls it time optimism, is not this thing. I'm starting to realize it may well be a cognitive disorder. Has the kind of like medical community, is there a lot of research here? I know in the US they have something called the DSM manual. I'm not sure what the equivalent is in Canada where you are. Is it caught up yet? And I know there can be illnesses that the medical community doesn't quite catch up and acknowledge until later. So I'm not trying to discount this as a legitimate illness, but I am curious, what is the kind of position of those who seek to help individuals?
Absolutely. So I think what people really get caught up in is that this alone does not constitute a disorder, right? This does not constitute having these conditions, or in more the neurodiversity forming language, this type of brain, right? It's a collection of traits. It's a collection of time management difficulties, attention difficulties, memory, planning, prioritizing, organizing, emotional regulation. All of those are within that clinical picture of would constitute someone having this type of condition. And so I think that, when people are like, oh, I just have this one issue, we have to just try to decide, is this part of a medical condition or is this other types of factors? For example, maybe it's the personality, maybe it's other factors like stress or anxiety, or maybe it's how they relate to the other person or culture, right? Some cultures tend to run late or don't really have a time to it. So there is a lot of research that's emerging now that actually have suggested time blindness or time agnosia as a biomarker for diagnostics in ADHD.
Wow.
So it's not as a definitive criteria in the DSM-5, and the DSM-5 has had lots of criticisms from the research community.
Well, didn't this manual list like being gay or homosexuality as a disorder? Like these things are not just because the medical community is a reflection of the culture at the time doesn't mean the culture at the time is right.
Correct, right? I mean, and that's what it is. Science evolves, right? As new research comes about. And it's this DSM-5, right? It needs to be seen as a guide.
Mhm.
And it constantly is evolving, right? There's a fifth edition, and now it's fifth edition text revision. So I think over time, it will include some of these other issues that now research is starting to show.
Let's get to the crux of this video, though. Accommodation. Like, even if this is a real thing, which it sounds like it very much is, or it can be something in conjunction with ADHD or other neurological or neurodivergent situations, how much is it on to the employer to accommodate? For example, I'm dyslexic. When I used to work in a big corporate office, my writings, my email, my written communication was garbage in its first draft. But there are strategies that I took upon myself. Like I would use a screen reader to read back what I just wrote. Because sometimes what ended up in the page and what was initially in my brain, huge disconnect. And I was able to merge that gap with a screen reader using a font that's aimed for dyslexic people. Or even asking for help, like people I work with. Hey, my written communication's garbage. If you notice a spelling mistake in my writings, can you just on the sly help me correct it and leave it at that? I kind of managed it myself. That way, when I had to give a presentation to the company, I wouldn't just say, oh, there's a spelling mistake, I'm dyslexic, you have to accept sloppy presentations. I'm using a sort of a convoluted example of my own neurodivergent situation, but how much is it on an employer to accommodate someone who has time blindness here?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really hard to give a general statement as to the answer because every case is individual, right? And that's why, at least here in Ontario with the human rights, when you look at the Human Rights Code for accommodating disabilities, it is a balancing act, right? So there's a balancing act between the need to accommodate the individual disability as well as accommodating the employer's need, right? So if it's going to cause undue hardship on the employer, whether it's really going to affect the way they operate their business or funds, then they don't have to provide that accommodation. But again, it's sort of like, did they show good faith? Did they show that they tried? Did they show that they engaged conversation? Because it's a variety of strategies. So sometimes maybe this particular individual may not have had support and learning these skills the way that you have self-accommodated yourself. And sometimes that's enough. Some people can accommodate themselves. They get their own skills or devices, and they don't have to disclose anything in the workplace. But some individuals do require a bit more support, even after skills, for whatever reason. And that's an ongoing conversation with the employer, and it depends on your job demands, right? So, arriving late if you're a nurse to take over a shift probably won't be a great won't be realistic because there's patient care and the nurse needs to go home and that shift change is important. It's an essential part of the job. But if you work in a job where maybe it's a bit more flexible with their time, like more flex time, you can start and stop whenever as long as you do your hours, this is not seen as a big issue. So it depends on the skills, strategy, supports are available, as well as the demands of the job.
So it's sort of like a pilot. They can't discriminate against me because I have bad vision. But if I were a pilot, the needs of that job are I got to see really well. Then the safety of the aircraft, all that balanced with my right not to be discriminated against because I got poor vision. You balance all that. I'm not going to get the pilot job. But if it were another job, I would be, couldn't be discriminated against that. Is that would that be a good analogy?
Yes, absolutely. Right. There's those essential needs of that job and how much of that job can be changed, how much of its resources can be employed. Maybe it's allowing use of headphones. Maybe it's allowing recording a meeting so the person can look at it later. Maybe it's provision of assistive devices like the smartwatch or check-ins with the supervisor to make sure that they're managing the project very well. So it is very dependent on those needs on both sides. So, and again, it's a whole process, right? It's not like you can just ask for it and you'll get it. It's an evolving dynamic conversation, and that you need some sort of medical documentation, completion of forms, and connecting with the human resources department.
I think why people responded to this video so badly is for some, it's like, okay, we're being too accommodating. This is just too much. This person is just late all the time. They're sharing it up front and they're never going to get a job. What do you say to critics like that with this particular ailment, time blindness?
Mm-hmm. So I think that it's always existed. And the reason why it's because there's a lot more media coverage around some of these problems. So before it wasn't really, I think people were really struggling before. And somehow, it was there is research showing that people with ADHD or autism and other conditions are, in fact, high percentage of unemployment, right? They had hard time keeping jobs. They're more at risk for disciplinary proceedings and hearings, and performance management plans because of these issues that weren't addressed. So just because now it's a light of now didn't mean it didn't exist before. There's a lot more awareness now around it. And now the question is, how do we provide the right supports? And again, accommodations is only one piece of the puzzle. Again, you can use strategies. And a lot of times there's access to care is limited, right? So people can't afford diagnostics in terms of ADHD or access to medications, which are costly and need insurance, because medications can also help with time blindness, or they don't have access to therapy and coaching to be able to learn these skills. So I don't think we're giving people a fair chance to be able to, have rightful employment for them.
Adam, thanks for picking into the nuance of this with me. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Adam Lee is an occupational therapist. He practices in mental health, ADHD, and cognitive rehabilitation. Coming up next, Man About Town and film critic Richard Crouse, a man I really like, a great talker. Him and I are going to go over movies that traumatize millennials. I got one that really messed me up that my bully brother forced me to watch. Richard's got thoughts on others. That up next. We are here with film critic, media personality, Man About Town, Richard Crouse. Richard, welcome as always.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Did you feel obligated to do this show because I did your fill-in show for Jim Richards the other night? The answer is probably yes.
Yes, indeed, but I would do it anyway, even if I didn't feel your knee on my throat. To return the favor.
I really like doing your show. In fact, I felt it was such a good appearance when your producer's like, do you want to do this tomorrow? I'm like, you know what? I just had a good appearance on the air with Richard. He probably thinks I'm a talented broadcaster. I'm never going back on the air with him again. It was like the George Costanza. I did have plans the next night. So, I mean, it wasn't just that, but I was very proud. I don't even remember what we talked about. Movies. It's always movies.
Well, we just went with no plan.
Yep.
No plan, national radio for 2 segments, and I thought it worked out really well.
I do that with Jim Richards every night, and it's always a mistake. Somehow it worked with you. But we are here to talk movies. There is one of these BuzzFeed lists or whatever, but it's a good motivating thing for a conversation. 10 movies that traumatize millennials. I am a millennial. You are...
I'm not.
A Gen X?
I probably, yeah. I'm not even sure. Old. I think that's fair.
My parents are having their 50th anniversary in a few weeks. My dad's having his 75th birthday a few weeks later. You're not that old.
Okay. That makes me feel better.
You look young. You're shaved. You're all cleaned up. Okay, let's do these movies. We're going to run out of time. I'm just going to keep on complimenting you. I'm just going to start with the one that traumatized me, and then we'll get into this list. I don't even know if people saw this movie, but my brother forced me to watch it, the bully that he is. He wouldn't let me leave the room. And it wasn't even that scary. I saw it again as an adult. Fire in the Sky. It's like a UFO alien abduction movie from the 90s. That one gave me, I was scared of being abducted for the next 10 years, I got to say.
Well, that's what happens, right? So when you're young, kind of an impressionable, those movies have an oversized impact on you. And that's a little different than a lot of the movies that are on this list that BuzzFeed put out or Screen Rant put out. Most of the movies on this list seem to have like unusual creatures or a pet dies or something like that. And I think that that's a different kind of thing. The alien invasion thing, something outside of your experience whatsoever, and it's the unknown. Who knows, right? That could happen. People talk about seeing UFOs all the time. The part of Canada that I'm from, Nova Scotia, has the oldest recorded UFO sighting in North America that happened in the town that I grew up in like 1650.
Wow.
And so it's something that, it's in the back of our heads. The giant, thing that looks like a dog in the never-ending story may be a little unsettling, but I don't think it's scary.
Okay, so that's the first one on the list. Are there any that really took you? I know E.T.'s not on the list. I guess that was before the millennial time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that this list kind of gets right and kind of gets wrong is that these are movies that certainly made an impression on a generation of kids who watched them. But I think that younger kids, can handle more dark material than we give them credit for. I grew up reading Where the Wild Things Are and, books like that were, dealt sort of head on with loss and grief and that sort of thing, weren't always just see Spot run. They were books that had a bit more depth to them and weren't afraid to explore some dark territory. And I think that kids, by and large, are okay with that. Now, what this gets right is that there is some imagery in here that will stay with kids and might be nightmare inducing. I remember when I was a kid, it's not a film, but there was a show that Rod Serling did called Night Gallery. And on Night Gallery, in one of the episodes, there was a bug that had two bright red eyes that would sort of burrow into your brain. Ugh. And I watched this thing, and then that was on. I watched it we had a summer house, like a cottage, in the remote middle of nowhere. And I went to bed, and there was a road that I could see through the trees, and every car that went by, they had to put their stoplights on because there was a stop sign up there.
Oh, the two red eyes, the brake lights. Yeah.
And that terrified me. So those images stay with you, right? Those images stay with you. And, you look at the pictures of the Dark Crystal.
Yeah, that was the one I was thinking, the Jim Henson. But I do want to rewind. There's something about reading as a kid. I don't know. You can do it at your own pace. You don't get the jump scare. You don't get the twisted psychological imagery. It's your imagination, right? And for me, it just was never as scary. And the Dark Crystal scared the crap out of me.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, and it was because I'm guessing these sort of half dinosaur, half bird looking creatures that populate this thing. I mean, they are very intense, but it's also Jim Henson. And I think that Jim Henson understood kids and the boundaries in which kids exist. And you might have been terrified by it, but did it give you nightmares? Are you still traumatized by the Dark Crystal?
No. In fact, I watched the TV show that they put out on Netflix, which had amazing puppetry, and it was okay, I guess. It got canceled. Actually, you know what? I thought it was pretty good, but maybe was it worth the amount of budget they spent on it? Was it that? That's the real question. When I see a show that's great, but I know they spent a huge amount of money on it, I'm like, it's not going to get renewed, even though everyone likes it, because it just didn't. The more they bet, the more they need it to succeed.
Well, that's what the studios have gotten into trouble with. Yep. Making movies that cost $400 million, hoping to make $1 billion. And if they don't make $1 billion, then it's a failure. What we've lost because of that kind of thinking are the $40 and $50 and $60 million kind of mid-budget dramas that used to populate theaters for decades, but they don't make $1 billion. And so studios don't want to make them.
But back to these movies, The Dark Crystal. I remember staying up at night thinking about it. I was stimulated by it and the festering faces of these bird-like dinosaur creatures that were trying to eat the good creatures. Yeah, you know what? It did keep me up as a kid, but it was kind of a thought-provoking movie. You know, there's these elements of, it's not just good versus evil. It's like really exploring the underbelly of humanity, you know, of where we could go. Kind of like the book The Time Machine. It did what it did for me as a kid. So no, it didn't give me a nightmares like Fire in the Sky did. Let's get through this list though. Are there any others that really stick out for you that are really freaky?
My Girl is one that is a good example of a movie that rightfully kind of rocked kids a little bit when they saw it, because it's Macaulay Culkin. Everyone loves him from Home Alone. It's Anna Chumley. She was, sort of it teen girl of the moment, starring in movies like this or a movie like this. But here's a spoiler alert. I don't know if you've never seen it, plug your ears. But the Macaulay Culkin character dies of an allergy at the end of the movie, and I think that is something that feels real. I think that is something that would be far more scary to me than the flying dinosaurs of the Dark Crystal or anything, All Dogs Go to Heaven, that kind of thing. Any of those kind of things that have sort of big monster creatures in them. I know those aren't real, but I know that allergies are real. And as a kid, I think I would have made that determination.
I'm lucky I didn't see it. As I'm reading here, Macaulay Culkin gets stung by a bunch of bees and then just dies. Yeah. I could imagine seeing that and being worried when I was with a friend every time a bee buzzed by. That was good alliteration, by the way. Bee buzzed by. Yeah, I guess that's the very real horror when you watch something and you think that could happen to me.
I am aware that in the world there are no vampires or werewolves, and Frankenstein doesn't exist. So for me, the scariest thing that I've ever read, the most terrifying book, is In Cold Blood, because it was about random violence that came out of nowhere. That it's a true story that altered a generation of one family, and that book terrifies me because the violence in it is real, it's brutal, and it was random. That's way more scary to me than Frankenstein or Dracula or any of them.
It's funny. I was talking to you before I started recording here. I was watching that Netflix show. It's okay, I guess. It's called Painkiller, and it's about the Oxycontin opioid crisis and how bad it got in small towns in the United States, watching people go from back injury to overdosing addict, and the family being destroyed along the way. I got a friend or two with a drug problem. I struggled with Xanax addiction up until about 5 years ago. I'm away from that now, but just watching it, it's like, that could have been me. That could have been my friend. Yep. It's I guess that's the real scary stuff. And I guess that's why I'm still thinking about it, even though it wasn't an amazing show.
Well, when you talk about, the Dark Crystal, how it played on your imagination, and reading stories that, would ruminate and knock around in your brain a little bit, that's the stuff that stays with you, because it is your horror. It's the thing that scares you. And so addiction and that sort of thing, that is something that, because it has touched your life personally, I think probably is scarier for you than The Brave Little Toaster.
And the most scary thing at all, having to do a 10-minute spot with me, but I appreciate you doing it, Richard. Film critic, media personality. You can check him out at richardcrouselikesmovies.net. That's your website, right?
Now, richardcrouse.ca.
I was close.
You were very close.
Richard, I appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, David.
Coming up next, Tony 5 will give us an update live from a Bulgarian airport. I mean, what can you expect from our foreign correspondent? He's in Bulgaria. We'll see who's in the airport with him. The man, the legend. He joins us from a Bulgarian airport. He is our Bulgarian airport correspondent. He is going to tell you everything you need to know about Bulgarian airports. Tony 5, welcome.
David, this is Tony 5 reporting live from Sofia Airport. Terminal 1, we're doing okay. We are going to have a walk around, David. I'm going to turn my camera around so that you can view the local wildlife, as they say here in where am I? Sofia.
Sofia.
So how are you, David? How was your birthday?
It was good. I did absolutely nothing. As they say, I did all. That's what my dad always says.
You did all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I say as well. Yeah, nice.
And it was nice. I made a pork chop, a double cut thick pork chop, which I think is kosher.
Wow. Are you sure?
I'm certain pork chops are in fact kosher.
Was it like a Jewish pig or something? Is that how you know?
Yeah, it said l'chaim before it was slaughtered. And then I had tomatoes.
Okay.
Tomatoes aren't in season yet, but if you dress them up, they can kind of round up to being in season. And then my girlfriend got me a cake from the cake shop down the street.
Was it kosher?
It was definitely kosher, and it was a hostess cake. Do you have those in the UK? It's like a chocolate with a white icing center and then fudge chocolate on the top. It was delicious.
Racist. Is Hostess the people that make the Twinkie?
Yes, although I think the Twinkie has changed hands over the last 10 years from bakery to bakery. I think they've gone out of business, they've restructured, but the Twinkie is still around. Just like it'll survive a nuclear explosion, it'll be the last food item available on Earth. The company has still maintained its, I don't know, this joke went nowhere. Tony, tell me about the airport. I'm looking at the camera here. It's not the nicest airport I've ever seen.
Oh, it's an absolute shithole, mate. And there's absolutely nobody. It's tragic. And I got here accidentally 4 hours earlier. So I look like a very, very bored terrorist because I was just sleeping here for about 3.5 hours.
Oh, lovely. How was the sleeping accommodation? You just crashed on a seat, or do you have access to the lounge? What's going on?
Lounge, David. Lounge. There is no lounge here.
Oh.
It's, I mean, what you're looking at is essentially the lounge.
It looks like
friends with the.
It looks like a high school cafeteria almost. You made friends with who?
It is. It is. Oh, do you not look at this guy? Oh, there's some nice people here, actually. It's look at this. Do you want to look at the sandwiches?
No, I see what you're referring to. For those who, do you have your headphones on, or am I going to embarrass somebody right now?
I do, David. You're not going to.
Tony is racistly pointing out to me that there's a Hasidic Jew, as if I know the guy. Hey, that's Moshe. I know him. Tell him I say hi. I hate you.
I feel like I want to, but I don't want to at the same time because I won't be allowed on the flight.
Yeah,
but it's pretty cool.
You can't go up to a Hasidic Jew and be like, "Hey, I'm on the phone with a Jewish person," and then he gives you a handshake.
It's exactly. I've been like to this sort of same sort of bar, not bar. It's like a sort of cafeteria about 7 times, and I think the poor woman who works here thinks I'm stalking her, which is really tragic.
Well,
so every time I have to come and buy sort of overpriced water.
Let's go over what they have in a fridge in a convenience store in an airport in Bulgaria. They got the Red Bull. They got the Monster Energy. They got.
Okay, we'll have a look. They got Red Bull.
What do they got?
This is my friend I've met here today. Hello again. She's not. I've been here for like 4 hours. I might as well work here now.
What kind of sandwiches they got rocking? I mean, that looks like
They're pulled pork sandwiches. They've got prosciutto crudo. You see that?
Yeah.
A lot of ham. Very, very meat.
What language is that? It's like Cyrillic characters.
Yeah, it's Cyrillic. Yeah, it's
Russian, Bulgarian,
like Russian. Yeah, is the language Cyrillic? It's Cyrillic, isn't it? Cyrillic. Yeah, it's Cyrillic, like Russian. Yeah.
Wow.
He's from America. Look, this guy. He's a DJ and he's in America.
I'm not a DJ.
Yeah. Do you want to say hello? Say hello. She says, "Look, there she is. Say hello."
No, I get it.
She's working in the bakery now at the moment.
I get it. Okay, so how was the trip? How was Bulgaria? We should not go to the toilet. You can't bring a.
You don't want to go to the toilet?
You can't bring a camera in the toilet. I mean, maybe you can, but.
I mean, I went to a shop yesterday and it had no smoking, no food, and no guns, which I always like that idea of someone going to a restaurant and thinking, "Oh God, I can't smoke. Oh, I can't bring my gun." So yeah, there was that earlier. There's a lot of sort of Bulgarian sort of mafia about, and you can spot them a mile off because they're all like heavily tattooed and stuff. I was okay. I mean, they didn't bother me, but it was quite nice actually to walk around and see how different cultures integrate. I mean, what you're looking at here is a typical Bulgarian walking away, and there's another one. Let's try and get close, David. I feel like, do you remember that I think it's a conservationist that went to live in a jungle with gorillas, and he got really close to them. See, that's what I'm doing now. If I approach very cautiously and closely, what you can see is a natural Bulgarian in their habitat, Dave.
It's just a woman in an airport. Would you go back to Bulgaria? Was it your first time there? Is it now your favorite country of all the countries?
No, I did like Bulgaria. I'll give you an interesting fact. Plovdiv, which is the second sort of biggest city after Sofia, is the most ancient city in Europe, David.
You already said this last time we spoke.
Yeah, fascinating fact. Yeah. Oh, hello. That's I don't know whether that's a stewardess or actual pilot, but yeah.
So we got Romania to the north, we got Serbia and Macedonia and Kosovo to the east, we got Greece to the south, and then Turkey to the kind of like southeast. And we're right on the Black Sea. Well, okay, I'm starting to understand more about Bulgaria.
Again, it was just called a sea before, but anyway, it was nice. I did like. I mean, honestly, it's a lovely place. The city is very, very nice. It's essentially one straight strip, which is called the Vestinu High Street, I think it's called. I've just made that up. It begins with V and has a new at the end.
Okay.
And it's got all your your regular shops, your H&Ms and your McDonald's either side of it. There's the culture's quite strange. It's an outdoor coffee culture, which I quite like. So you'll find a lot of people sitting outside and stuff, and just watching the world go by. What I did find interesting is a lot of people there. They don't go out until sort of midnight or 1 a.m.
Oh, they're party. Are they party people over there?
They really do. So, like for example, the UK by like 11 o'clock, unless it's a Friday, Saturday, most things are sort of shut. People go to bed and get up in the morning. But in Bulgaria, yeah, they really only go out about 12 or 1. And my most exciting thing was I met a girl out here. She was lovely, and she said, "Have you been to the hidden bars?" And I said, "No, because they're hidden." And she gave me the address to a hidden bar down a really dodgy alley. And I must admit, I thought I was going to get killed, raped, and then stabbed in that order. But I went down. You have to knock at this door. They open up, and I'll send you the video. But it's this amazing, like cellar, but it's filled with candlelight. It was absolutely stunning, mate.
Wow. And so was it, have you ever been to, I've been to like secret bars in the US and they're always kind of cheesy. Like they're made to feel like they're Prohibition era, but it's just
speakeasies. Yeah, exactly.
Was this was this much more special?
No, this was just a cellar filled with candles. Like, I don't know whether it was a speakeasy or whatever, but it wasn't like the ones I imagine that are in London and that are very similar to the ones in the US are very pretentious.
Yeah.
They're sort of overtly hidden, if that makes sense. And you've got to be an influencer to go there. But this was literally just like a cellar that I put some candles up. And he was saying the drinks weren't particularly expensive.
Okay. So it was kind of a dump. It was like a creaky cellar with candles, but that made it special.
Yeah. And the people were nice in there and some music in there and stuff. Oh, there he's again.
You can't just look at Hasidic Jews.
I'm filming everybody. He just happens to be in frame.
You can't point at a Hasidic Jew and then say, David, there he is. You did that the last time I was with you in London. You do it in New York. You have to stop. We don't all know each other, although I do know that guy. I went to Hebrew school with him, yeah.
I thought you did. He did give me a Black Power symbol just now in BLM.
You're ridiculous. But Tony, I don't know what else to say. I better let you go. You got a plane to catch. But thank you for the various Bulgarian updates that we didn't want, didn't need, that weren't enjoyable, but we're glad you gave us.
I'm going to give you a further update, David, that on Saturday, which I might be able to record on Friday night, I will be going to Il Francais, which is French for France.
Okay. You're going to Paris?
Nope. I'm going to Calais.
I thought Paris was on the Ile de France or whatever.
Yeah, very similar. It's not far, about 2-hour drive.
Okay. All right, Tony, thank you for doing this. Just fly safe. Do they have airplanes or do you have to like take a weird buggy?
No, we're going to pedal. Apparently, we've all got to sort of stick our feet out and try and push the plane out. It is absolutely tragic here. So if I don't make it back, David, please don't tell the people who listen to this show, the person, essentially my mum, that I love her.
Why are you pointing the camera at the Hasidic Jew, Tony? Stop. It's racist and it's not nice to me. Tony, thank you as ever.
Bye, David. Enjoy yourself. Love you lots.
In a moment's time, Daniel Tsai, a lawyer and tech expert. I will ask him what not to ask ChatGPT because privacy may be a concern here. Maybe don't tell the computers everything that you don't want widely disseminated. We'll pick that apart with him up next. We are here to discuss privacy and what you should or should be not. One more time, what you should or should not be feeding a chatbot or generally giving big tech companies. I'm here with Daniel Tsai, a lawyer, an MBA, a professor at the University of Toronto. Daniel, welcome. Thanks for chatting with us about me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for chatting about this with me. I don't know what's wrong with my brain this morning, Daniel. Okay, last night, my sister was trying desperately to put together a book and have a company, I don't know, bind it or publish it, who knows what, for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. I had to deliver something. She said, how about a poem? I don't know. I'm A, dyslexic, B, not that good a writer, and C, a bit lazy. I start giving ChatGPT all these details about my parents and the kinds of jokes I want to crack and the kinds of sincere things I want to say. I feed it about 10 bullet point prompts, a little bit intimate, you know, what their address is, that kind of thing. It gave me an all right poem. I did what most people do. I tweaked it, and that's going to be in the book. Should I have done that, Daniel, or did I just give ChatGPT a little bit too much about my parents?
Well, first of all, did the poem actually land with the audience? Like, did people cheer and think it was a great poem that you wrote, or did they realize it was AI?
Well, my parents haven't been presented with it. I assume they're baby boomers in their 70s. I don't think they're going to know you can do that with AI. So I think I'm going to get away with it. If it's lousy, they'll just think I did a bad job.
Well, one thing people don't realize is all the information you feed into AI or into a ChatGPT type AI is it's learning. So it learns more about you and it retains that information. So one has to be mindful, the more personal you get, that information can be used to data mine, market products to you, manipulate you. And what's interesting is we've seen this with big tech. I mean, this is how they operate. This is how they became so commercially successful. The Facebooks and Google is because their algorithms are all based on personal data. They want to know where you're surfing. They want to know what you're buying. They want to know what you're reading. And all that stuff that you feed into a AI chatbot, that's going to be information they have about you.
It's interesting. I used to work in big tech. I used to work in Silicon Valley. Here's one thing that always kind of gets me. So ChatGPT, OpenAI, they say the information that you type in, we're going to hold, but it'll be private. It'll just be held in your account. So we're not going to use it to train our wider AI. We're just going to use it to train your prompts to help you. Fine. Even if you trust them, which I don't, but even if you do trust them, what happens if they go out of business? You know, it's their privacy policy today, but they have the data, and if they get acquired or they change their privacy policy, all of a sudden that data can then get sold, that data can then be trained. So the scary thing for me is even if you trust a company, what they're doing today, if they're retaining that data, tomorrow it could be sold off, tomorrow it could be used by someone else. That's always kind of scared me.
Well, in theory, the data that they have is subject to whatever the original contract is. It's just assigned to the new company. But at the same time, we know that having looked at the Facebook situation in Cambridge Analytica, there are circumstances that you could have misuse of the data anyway. And even if you have that contract in place or if the company changes, they don't always stick to the terms. And that's always problematic. So it really comes down to a question of trust. And unfortunately, a lot of people we do trust technology, whether it's self-driving cars or if it's putting personal private information into a chat bot. My students, for instance, they even though they're aware of all the terms and conditions and how TikTok and other apps can access their personal information, their videos, their photos, their address books, their messages. They love the convenience and they're addicted to the app. And so they've compromised on their personal privacy for the convenience of what they think is an app that's helping their lives. And it's really not that simple.
Is there a herd mentality that could be used as an argument to justify it here? Like if everyone is sharing all this data to this company, am I going to be the one who gets targeted? There's a chance, but if everyone's doing it, it's unlikely that it's going to be me. Why is that a terrible argument? Or do you think that's an okay argument to use things like TikTok or services that we know really collect a lot of data about us?
Well, they're actually individualizing, personalizing the data. So in other words, you think you're throwing it into one giant pot, but they're still able to, in most cases, individualize it to you. And so they're aware of your unique preferences. If you're really into conspiracy theories, or if that's the type of content that gets you really engaged and upset, well, they send you more of that content because the so-called signals that you generate are the ones that makes you stay on the platform longer and allows them to sell more advertising. One thing I don't think people realize is if you use any of these ChatGPT type AI bots, is they can also get smarter. You're training it with the data you're putting into it. I'll give you a great example. I asked ChatGPT about whether Queen's University had a faculty association for a union, and it confused it with Queen's University in the UK. And what I did was I actually corrected it and I said, I think you've got the answer wrong. You're confusing it with a different Queen's University. And I went back to it, asked the same question, and it had self-corrected based on my inputs and the fact that I had taught it something. That's where we get into the whole Skynet type, situation where we're training the AI with our interactions, and be careful because you know what the end product's going to be.
They say that training stays local within your account. You know, it just kind of remembers your history. It remembers a few key points about you. But it is scary. And do you trust it? And yeah, what if they change their policy tomorrow? What if they're not telling the truth? I mean, if you want to go Skynet level, what if the system isn't configured properly and the data bleeds, you know? But to rewind what you were saying about these algorithms and these timelines, do you think I've always wondered this, do you think the original designers of these kind of personalized feed ideas, when it first started appearing on Twitter, on Facebook, do you think they realized it would lead to kind of echo chambers where if I'm at all curious about conspiratorial thinking, a week later my feed's going to be QAnon? If I'm all, whatever weird fringe belief that I have, these timelines are going to validate and validate and validate, and it's going to be this horrible feedback loop. Do you think they had that in mind and they just didn't care? Or do you think that kind of happened by accident and it was sort of an emergent property of a system that wasn't designed that way?
Well, I mean, the whistleblower for Facebook Meta, Frances Haugen, came out and said, as a data scientist that looked inside Facebook, they had research that showed that their algorithms did exactly what you said, which is they feed into a negative feedback loop. If you're a young girl, a teenage girl, your Insta account is feeding into poor self-image. And they're aware of that because their own research kind of showed that that this was a tendency of their algorithms. And remember, like I said, they're not really thinking about the long-term mental, emotional health of the individual or the political health of the country or the other implications at stake. What they're really interested in is engagement, and the algorithms are based on signals like what types of content that really gets you upset, emotionally engaged, and anger is what drives people back to keep using the content. It's not feelings of love and warmth per se. And so we know that that's part of sort of the secret sauce to how these algorithms work, and big tech knows it too. But the problem is it's so intertwined with money that if you know that by having controversial content, conspiracy theories, things that are debunked, science that are just wrong, but people read it because people are looking for alternative points of view. They want self-validation. So a lot of this is like people who want validation, not because they want to be right, or think they want the validation because it's based on opinion, based on politics, based on culture, not based on actual science and truth. And so that's something we've seen from a business point of view, for instance, in marketing. We're not looking at trends such as demographics, people's ages, what neighborhoods they live in, and so forth. We're finding, like at least in marketing, that what's really kind of stands out is political beliefs. People are making decisions in terms of their purchases based on their politics and culture. And so I think what we're sort of seeing is this is all now intertwining, where you have algorithms mixed up with business, the profit motive by big tech, and the fact that human nature is at play, and we're very tribal by nature. And so all these things coalesce and create I think in some ways a dangerous phenomenon.
Yeah, I think the lessons were there for these algorithms designers. With tabloids and sensationalized newspapers, we knew that sensationalized stories, that stuff that wasn't necessarily true sold. You just apply it to a customized feed in modern kind of app technology. It shouldn't surprise people that's what sells. Daniel, thanks for coming here. I appreciate you talking about this stuff with me.
Yeah, me too. Appreciate it.
Daniel Tsai is a lawyer, an MBA, and a professor at University of Toronto. That is our show. I had an all right birthday yesterday. Thanks for asking. I will see you tomorrow, and thanks for listening to whatever the hell this is. I still have no idea. Cue theme music.